Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Metaphysical Musings. My name is Mehta. I'm the CEO of Gainsight, and I have the pleasure of getting to have amazing discussions with inspirational guests about the world of customer success and product and how those are coming together. Today, I'm super excited to welcome to our virtual stage, Jason Knight. Jason is the product director at Unmind, and on the side, he's the host of the extremely popular One Night in Product, which I love that name, by the way, podcast. He's a self-described lifelong learner and obsessed with personal growth. And that really fits with the way we think about things at Gainsight. One of our values, Jason, is beginner's mind and always learning. So really excited about that. And excited to have you here to talk about kind of the world of product and how it's evolving. But before we do that, I'd love to start with an icebreaker. We always like to start with icebreakers. And my team did some research and they saw that it sounds like you and I are both trying to cling on to our youth by being into memes, right? It's hard to keep up with my teenagers and their memes, but I still have a few I like. Is there a meme that you like or maybe reflects product management, something you think about?
Well, firstly, thanks for the warm intro. And secondly, when it comes to memes, I mean, I'm going to have to be a bit of a self-promoting homer here because I quite like to make my own memes. I think,
nice.
Very keen to try and share some of my British cynicism with the world through the content or for the medium of
British people are
content.
cynical. I have never heard that before.
I have been accused of it a couple of times. So it's actually really interesting timing because put something up towards the beginning of the week, kind of a film meme of Pulp Fiction with the two guys in the car talking about the difference between Europe and American McDonald's.
Yes, I remember.
Royale with cheese, all that sort of stuff.
Cheese,
but I
totally.
basically subtitled it with basically the difference between Silicon Valley and European product management and just dumped it up. And I thought, it's just another one of my pointless memes, but it's actually so far on LinkedIn hit 1.5 million views, been shared a bunch of times. Everyone's saying either it's the best or in some cases the worst, most unfair meme that they've ever seen. So I've got to give a little bit of love to my one little minute, a few minutes of fame in the viral spotlight.
I will check that out. That sounds awesome. Wait, give me, what is the difference? If you had to give it to me in a sentence, what is the difference? Now I'm curious.
Well, this is the interesting thing because actually the meme on the face of it is very funny, and especially if you read it in the voices of the people doing it. But
yeah,
exactly. But and then also someone did say to me, "Oh, you should get like some voice actors off of Fiverr to do some impression." I looked into it, and there are some really bad voice actors on Fiverr, and all very expensive as well. So I nixed that idea, nipped that in the bud very quickly. But the most interesting thing about the meme is it doesn't actually make any sense. It's not like a well-researched, like super deep insight into product management across the two countries. Of course, there are loads and loads of companies in Silicon Valley that do things quite poorly. I mean, I've never been to Silicon Valley yet, but I speak to a lot of people from out there. They tell me a lot of war stories. I know that it's not all like the books out there. And also there are some very well-run, good product companies in Europe and in the UK as well. So like the meme doesn't make any sense in most ways, but it's, I guess, just the feeling of it, this idea that there's this kind of bubble of Silicon Valley tech goodness, like where all the good product stuff is done, where all of the good books have come from. And then there's like the rest of the world, which are laboring under the yoke of project management practices and SAFe and PMOs and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't think that's true, but it certainly made for a funny meme.
You guys you're all still doing mainframe coding over there, right? You're still building IBM AS400 or whatever in COBOL, and
no one got fired for buying IBM. I actually started out programming on green screens, actually, so that was an interesting.
Well, that's a good segue because I'm super excited for this conversation, and I would love to have the audience hear your background. For folks that don't know, I started my career in product management eons ago in on-premise software and kind of working in the back room, shipping CDs. I'd love to hear your backstory, Jason.
Yeah, it's interesting because product management's normally where you end up, not where you start, right? Like,
that's right.
As with many product managers, it's kind of been a real circuitous journey. Like I didn't go to product school and get a degree or anything like that. Product school, product university, whatever. Like I very much kind of came up from the ground floor, which I'm actually very proud of. I think it's important to learn a lot of things along the way, get broad experience and do as many things as you can. So I dropped out of uni early because I just wasn't cut out for that sort of thing, as it turns out, and took a 2-week temporary job at a call center, which lasted, 2.5 years or something like that. So obviously really bad planner as well. Eventually got into their IT team because I had a bit of kind of computing nous on the side, started programming the aforementioned green screen terminals, writing shell scripts and deck command language and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then just proceeded through my career, spent quite a long time as a developer of different systems, either analysis, like doing data analysis and printing out thousands upon thousands of pieces of paper, like tabulations for research purposes. And then you'd find out that one of the things that appeared on every page was wrong, and you had to then chuck them all away and do it all again, and then print them all out another 1,000 pages. So that was a different time. PDFs have definitely saved the day there. But yeah, as I progressed through my career, started working a lot more on sort of web applications, and then started getting a bit more interested in, well, what those web applications actually did and why they should do them. Started dealing a lot more with stakeholders, dealing a lot more with people using the software as well. So product management was almost like a very long fade in. Like, it wasn't like I just one day just said, hey, I'm a product manager now. It felt like the natural extension of all of the different things that I'd developed during my career. I actually only had product in my job title as of like 2019.
Wow.
As a product person with like product star in my job title, I was very much a late bloomer, but product management as a concept really feels like something that I've grown into over probably the last 15 years or so. So it's definitely been an interesting journey, learning how to make software, then learning why to make software, and then latterly trying to work out a lot more around like, well, actually how to be a proper strategic product leader rather than being someone who's like a really good contributor. And that's something that I think a lot of product people struggle with, and something that I've tried to get much better at, and something I'm also trying to help other people get better at as well, because it's a tricky ride if you don't have support.
I love that you shared that, because I think some people have this impression that you have to have a perfect set of skills to become a product manager, and all of a sudden you become a product manager, and this clouds part in the sky, the sun comes down on you, you're Steve Jobs, and and it's not like that. I've asked so many people this question, and their paths are very circuitous, non-linear, start and stop, and it's not this binary. All of a sudden you become one. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, just to say, like, my career has been a bit all over the place, and I'm again very proud of that. But I also spent 19 years working for a big corporate as well. Like, it's not been this whole kind of just coming up, starting my startup, failing, and then getting acquired, and then going to work for someone else. Like, I've gone through loads of different types of company and types of job and loads of different experiences. And I think, whether I did very well at any of those or not, that the experiences that I gained from all these different types of places that I've been and the people that I've had to deal with has been really helpful, because you don't get too many surprises anymore. Like, you know how business is done, right? And I think, I'm an older guy now, I'm in my 40s, and that's, good in some ways. I mean, I'm also probably one of the oldest people in my company, so that's also a thing that happens when you're in your 40s. But like, when you get to a certain level of lived experience, I think actually that lived experience is super helpful for PMs, product leaders, and beyond, because again, like, sure, there are going to be challenges in the road ahead, but you don't get so many surprises anymore, because you've generally seen some version of something like this before in some way.
So that it's a real good segue, Jason, because I had a fortune of reading some of your blog posts. I love your writing, and you had one of my favorites was the dreaded product manager barbecue question. And I'd love for you to explain what you were talking about, and then also the different answers to this dreaded question.
Yeah, so this was a question I actually came up for the podcast a little while back, just as almost like wasn't really an icebreaker because it came at the end, but it was like just a fun, how would you describe product management if you were at a barbecue, met some new person that you never met before, and they ask you what you did, and maybe they're a doctor or something like that. So like, they've got a job that everyone understands roughly what it is and everyone kind of respects, and then they say to you, well, what do you do? And you say, I'm a product manager. And they say, well, what's a product manager? And you're like, oh God. And then it's that kind of Homer gif, like, fade back into the fence, because you don't want to it's a really hard, like, it's hard even to explain to some technology people sometimes, because there are so many different versions of what that is. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting question, which I kind of stopped asking after a while, and I probably should maybe put it back, or maybe do some quick fire rounds or something like that. But I think it's really interesting hearing like what people weight in the response, whether they're just weighting all about users, or whether they're talking about business outcomes, or whether they're actually just talking about being more of a project manager and just getting stuff done and helping the developers build software. And sometimes people will try to use really tortured analogies. And I'm a big fan of a tortured analogy, by the way. Like, I think imperfect analogies are a great way of explaining things to people, because you want to bring things into, terms that they understand, right? And that's not understanding in a kind of egotistical, oh, you're so silly, you don't understand way. It's just like everyone's got their own experience, and if you can find a way to connect with that, then I think that's a good way to do it. So I think I described it to my nephew the other day. He asked me what I did for a living with a family retreat, and I think I, broadly speaking, explained it as I work with all of the people in the company and the users of our software product to make sure that the company builds the best product for those users that it can, or something along those lines. Now, I have no idea if that's the best thing or if it's missed something out. I make up a new thing every time. In many ways, it's just about giving them a flavor. Like, some people have said to you, oh, well, but what about this one thing that you didn't say? It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not writing a book about what it is to be a product manager. I'm just trying to give a flavor of what type of thing I do. I'm not a software developer. Yep. I'm not a marketer. I'm not an analyst. I'm not a founder of a company. I obviously do bits of all of those jobs in some sense, or I have knowledge of some of those areas or all of those areas in some sense, but I'm not any of those people. So just trying to simplify it down. And you get some people, when you ask that question, they really tie themselves up in knots trying to really explain absolutely everything. And I think for me, simplicity is key.
Yeah. So read the blog post for the folks watching. It's really good. They talk about fundamentalist answer, abstract philosopher, giver-upper. It's pretty funny. My favorite answer to the question, Jason, is, of course, I don't know if you've seen Office Space, the movie.
What do you do here, right?
Yeah. So what do you do here? And it's like, take the requirements from the customer and I give them to the engineers. Why don't they just give the requirements directly from the customer to the engineers?
Because I'm good with people.
Good with people. So, one of the big topics right now in product management is product-led growth. You can't walk down the street and not hear PLG. I was at a conference yesterday. I think I heard it like 100 times. But PLG is obviously a bit of a response to what we never called, but is always traditionally been sales-led growth, right? Nobody calls it that, but that's just what it is, the traditional model. And obviously, there's a tension there, but there's some downsides to a pure sales-led growth model. So talk about what you think of sales-led growth and maybe how PMs should think about growth in general.
Yeah, so I mean, just to call out, I've worked B2B my entire career. So there's always been salespeople in my life to some extent. And just to also call out, I work very closely and I love working with the salespeople. I think salespeople, there's this kind of tension that can sometimes develop between sales teams and product teams. I remember once, and I've probably told this story multiple times before, but hopefully not to anyone that's listening to this, about how I was in one job, a social event after work with some of the team. One of the senior sales account leads was at the pub next to me. We were having a drink, and he kind of leant over and said to me something along the lines of, Jason, I don't understand why you think the things that you think are important are important. He just couldn't get to grips with why I would push back about certain things, or why I wanted to do certain things in a certain way. Now, that taught me two things, and this was a few years back now, but that taught me two things. One of which is, well, there's a lot of work to do here, right, to actually try and help to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
But it also taught me that there's just a fundamental difference in the way that many salespeople see the world and product people see the world. So salespeople are obviously, they're quoted, they're going out to win deals. They've got to get a certain amount of money in, otherwise they're not going to get paid as much. And if they keep doing that, they're probably going to get fired. That's a very different position to a product manager who's sitting there going after a market or a segment of a market, sitting there trying to make the best decision for the many, in many ways, whilst being interested and curious about the specific individual deals, not necessarily wanting to over-optimize for any one of them.
Absolutely.
But they're not getting bonused or fired based on those deals. So, of course, there's going to be this tension between the two. So I think a big part of the job of a product manager or product leader when dealing with a sales team is trying to bridge that. And I don't think it's actually 100% bridgeable, to be honest. There's always going to be some level of tension at that boundary, but I think that's okay as long as everyone understands that they're on the same team. I never look at salespeople and think, oh God, they're working for a different company almost. Yeah. It's no, we're all working for the same company. We all have our own ideas about how we're going to make this company successful, and we obviously have to debate vigorously and defend our positions on that from time to time. But we should never think of ourselves in opposition. Now, I will caveat, sometimes in a sales-led model, you do have what in the challenger sale, which we were just talking about, would be called your kind of lone wolves that go off and just try and do anything and do whatever to promise anything to try and win a deal, and then kind of wash their hands of it because they've got their bonus. Like that is a thing that does happen, and I have worked with people in the past that have been very like so ultra focused on just getting deals over the line that it seemed like they'd just do anything to get it across, and that's obviously a challenge. But except for those types of people, I think that it's possible to have a very good relationship between product and sales, and that they can help each other a lot, because salespeople are talking to product, or salespeople are talking to prospects and customers all the time. So why would you not listen to them? They're not talking to them in exactly the same way you would, but it's still valuable input that you can take into your planning processes and to try to develop your understanding of, especially in B2B, what's going on in the market, right?
Absolutely. And, you can for the people watching, some of you are in the customer success world. I think all that applies to customer success and sales.
100%. 100%.
Everything, and I totally agree with you. It's just an orientation difference about I've got a set of customers versus I have a product or a feature, and you have to find that intersection point. One thing, Jason, that, it's a good segue, because you wrote another really interesting post called "The Disappointing Tension Between Some Developers and Some Product Managers," right? And not all, but some. And you started your career doing a little bit more development and moved into more of the product and product leadership world. So you've been on both sides. So talk about like that tension. Where is it healthy? Where is it unhealthy? How should people navigate it?
So this is interesting because there's a couple of ways that tension can manifest itself. On the one hand, as you say, I was a developer for a number of years. I have developed stuff. I know how to develop things and to set stuff up, and I can probably still, if I try, be like the Steve Buscemi with his baseball cap and the skateboard, trying to pretend that I'm still cool like all the developers.
I love it.
I'm not supposed to develop anymore. I don't develop anymore. The only marginal development I get to do these days is updating my podcast website, and that's the way it should be. Like that's fine. I've moved on from that world. I'm not better than that world. I'm just in a different world now, and that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
I will never ever diminish or talk down to developers, because A, I was one, but B, they're some of the most important people working in a tech company.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there's this interesting side note there. Like sometimes you get the kind of the polls that come up generally from developers, like, well, if you could get rid of developers or PMs or salespeople, who would you get rid of? And it's like, no, you need all of those folks, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Just because you can't develop without developers doesn't mean you've got a business without a business is more than just developers. And I think that that's where some of the tension comes in, where you get really fundamentalist, agile, XP developer, they're all about the code. They don't really see there should be any PMs at all. I remember there was a video that got posted a few weeks back now, the famous or the infamous swimming pool PM, who some developers were really digging into, because she had the audacity to be talking about product management on a company retreat in a swimming pool. And so many of the comments that came off the back of that were really instructive about the somewhat fraught relationships between developers and PMs. Now, I think that, as with sales, is a really bridgeable gap. I think that a lot of this comes from, and this is going to be a broad sweeping statement, but I also love those alongside the analogies. There's a lot of developers out there that have probably never really worked for a particularly good company or worked with particularly good PMs. I'm not blaming the PMs for not being good in this case, by the way. I'm saying that they're working in environments, or they're working without support, bad environments or without support, and they're not being able or coached to being able to do their jobs, and therefore they're acting in a certain way, which is then rubbing up against developers who themselves in the same environment are getting judged on things that they don't or shouldn't really be being judged on. Like, maybe they're getting judged on number of lines of code they write every day or something like that, or being really cracked over the knuckles every time they miss their velocity targets or something like that. These people are not working for good companies, and I think that it's fair to say that there are lots of not good companies out there, and many people come from those not good companies. And I do believe that a lot of the tension comes from, in many ways, it's like you feel that these people should be uniting against not necessarily the company, but like the system within their company that's causing these things to happen, rather than what sadly tends to happen, which is they all start fighting each other. And then what you get is a lot of people, a lot of developers complaining about PMs because they've never worked with, or they've never had a good relationship with the PM, because they've always worked in terrible product companies. And I think that's at the root of a lot of it. And I think that also now that you've got a lot of PMs these days coming in maybe from non-development backgrounds, which I support, by the way. I think it's important to have this rounded skill set, like getting people in from other avenues, I think is really important and valuable. But of course, then you've got this maybe additional tension that you can sometimes have when maybe the developers don't think that these PMs that aren't or weren't developers can really understand what the heck they're talking about,
Right.
which then makes it even more tricky. So
more fraught. No, I think it's a good point. And I think that one thing I've seen on the positive side, you've probably seen this too, is developers that have worked with great PMs say that it's one of the most important things in the world is to have a great PM. Like when you said, oh, we can do agile and we don't need PMs, I almost laughed out loud. I was like, good luck. How's that going to work? You're going to get blocked every day. Right. And so once you've worked with not just good PMs, but a good system with PMs and developers, I feel like you realize it's a system. You need all the parts of the system. Right.
100%. And I think it's really important for everyone to realize, and this is something that I'm really keen to try to work out ways to spread more, is like everyone's job, like you get PMs or you get developers looking at PMs and saying, oh, well, they're not doing much. They just go to a bunch of meetings or whatever. Like everyone's job looks easy if you're not doing the job. Like there's this whole iceberg thing, there's a bit that you see. And this isn't just a PM and a developer thing. This is a sales thing, a customer success thing, a account manager thing. Like everyone just looks at it and they see the few interactions that they have and they just assume that person is doing nothing else. And of course, that's completely untrue. And I think that we would all get on across all of the functions a lot better if we just appreciated that the vast majority of companies don't pay people to sit around doing nothing.
Oh, I'd love that. I mean, it's funny that we're very values driven as a company at Gainsight. And, one of the things we talk about is assuming other people in your company have good intentions and are skilled for their job. And if the outcomes aren't being achieved that we want, it's usually not just that individual's fault. It's a system problem, right? Yeah. It's a problem of strategy or coordination or collaboration. But, speaking of values, one of the things that I've seen you do really well is just, you got a voice, you've got an audience, you try to lead by example. We saw the episode you did with Darby Maloney about just being a woman in the product management field. Obviously, historically wasn't as inclusive to women and other people from underrepresented backgrounds. Talk a little bit about the importance of leading through empathy and inclusion and how you kind of have seen that in your own career.
Yeah. So, I mean, Darby, just for people that don't know, she was the infamous swimming pool PM as well. So that was the
one you mentioned. Yeah,
exactly. And that was she was viral on product Twitter for a day and a half, and then that all died down, and hopefully she's got back to doing a cool TikTok videos again. But I think that the thing that really struck me from that was how unfair the criticism was. And of course, there's no argument that life should actually be fair, but at the same time, we should at least aspire for it to be a bit more fair, right? Because ultimately, she didn't do anything wrong, and she was being judged primarily because she was a young woman in a swimming pool talking about product management. And there are so many videos out there of all these tech bros, doing wheelies on their segways, if you can even do that sort of thing, and just doing all the most ridiculous things. And I think I'm a middle-aged, white, cisgendered, straight guy. I'm basically the least likely to be oppressed of any group, and I have to own up to that. And obviously I can't do anything about it other than hopefully use that to help other people in whatever way I can. Now, I'm definitely not saying that I'm some kind of hero or anything like that. Absolutely not. There are plenty of people, way many more people doing much better work than I do or probably ever could do. However, like you say, I do have a somewhat of a voice, certainly in the product community. I'm kind of known in certain areas. And I think rather than just me, for example, with my podcast or with my Twitter or whatever it is, however I can engage with people, not just talking to a load of people that look like me and act like me and think like me, but try to use what influence I do have to try and help further the careers or the aspirations of some of the people that aren't in the privileged position that I'm in. I can't change me being in a privileged position, but if I can use that position to help other people, I'm all for that. And again, I don't think it's interesting because, so much of this has come for me, again, through my career working with so many different people of all different races and genders and sexualities from all over the world as well, because I've had the the good luck to work in companies that had representation everywhere. Like, and I've been working closely with it. And like maybe when I was younger and growing up in a village in the middle of southeast England and surrounded by white people like me, maybe if I'd have stayed there, I wouldn't have developed these opinions. But for me, having worked with and been friends with and visited and socialized and had so many wonderful experiences with all of these different types of people all around the world, I'm just really, really keen to make sure that whatever I can do, I do. And again, that is limited. I'm definitely not in any way saying that I'm doing anything special, but if I can make any small difference, then I'm definitely keen to do it.
I love, Jason, thank you so much for sharing that, being so open and vulnerable about that. And I think it's interesting. So much of what we're talking about today, nominally it applies to product, but it really applies to all parts of business. So
decency, right?
Product's just a really good lens and also a really good career. So the more you can bring people into it, the more opportunity there is. So I'll close out, PLG is a hot topic, and obviously a lot of people are trying to figure it out practically. And, we did a survey recently about, we call it the product-led growth index, and we asked people a bunch of questions about product-led growth. One of them was basically, are you doing PLG or not? And it's funny because it's such a buzzword. Obviously, a lot of people say they're doing it. Are they really doing it? What does that mean? About 58% of people said they're doing it. So the 42% that said they're not, we asked them why they don't do it, and they said their product isn't ready. And so in some ways, it's a little bit like being ready to be a product manager, like at the very beginning of this conversation. People think of it as all of a sudden I am PLG. One day I wake up and I'm PLG. And I kind of think of it a little more continuum. I'd love to hear your perspective on that, on like readiness for PLG. What does that mean?
Well, if we're going to talk about the kind of classic PLG, your Wes Bush PLG type tropes, then you need to have a product that you're happy and willing to put in front of people without being there next to them or having to show them a video first, right? So I would say that whilst I agree with you that there's probably not like just a ready kind of go, not go, there is a continuum and there's probably stages that you can take. The kind of traditional trope is that there's so much software out there which is just completely trash to use, to look at, to interact with, and you need so much support to even get started. And that's obviously where some of the product-led growth stuff around like onboarding and good quick time to value and stuff like that really starts to come in. And I think that I genuinely believe that is a good thing to strive for. Do I think that every single product out there is ready for product-led growth? And it's not even about the product in those cases. It's also about the companies, right? So for example, I've worked for companies selling APIs that banks integrate into their back office systems to bring data and such into their workflows. Now, that was a product. We were building it as a product. It was a very technical kind of, it was a product that we sold the same thing to multiple people. We weren't building APIs specifically for the banks, but none of those banks were going to buy that API and integrate it off the credit card and pay $29.99 a month for it.
It wasn't going to be Twilio or Stripe or something. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that just wasn't going to happen. So now we obviously had web stuff on the side of that as well. And maybe there are more angles to do there. But again, I think it's not just about your product. It's about your company. It's about your ICP. It's about the market that you're going after. And it's quite possible that the people that you're selling to, based on whatever the type of product is that you're selling to them and the problem that you're solving and the value of the product, the cost of the product, they might not want to buy it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think that it's very important, even if you are still leading with a sales force and even if you're not ready to go kind of credit card sign up or whatever, to take some of the best aspects of product-led growth to make sure that your product is actually better. So, for example, we can't hide behind salespeople anymore and say that the only way that we can sell our product is if we hide it until they bought it and then they see it and then they're like, duh, because like that, eventually that's going to go wrong. Like you're going to get out competed by someone at some point. I remember chatting to the CPO of Xero, the accounting firm, and like I have no idea if they're specifically product-led growth or if you always have to go through sales. But one of the things that struck me about accounting software is that it's presumably one of those industries, given its age and vulnerability, that ultimately there could be a lot of bad software in that industry. But one of the things that Anna, the CPO, was very keen to say is that like UX and design was such a fundamental part of what they're building because they want it to be a delightful experience. And I'm sure that there are salespeople out there that can continue to sell a lemon for the next 10, 15 years. But eventually, I genuinely believe that these companies will get shouldered out come renewal time, and certainly when it comes to new prospects, because ultimately people are going to start to have higher expectations. People are seeing new software all the time, and they're interacting with more and more complicated software all the time. So if we don't make our software better, even if we still need a salesperson to sign the deal, then someone's going to eventually come and take our lunch.
100% agree. I totally agree. I think that's why everyone needs to think about it in some dimension, like you said. But I think you're right, though, that point about it being about the buyer and the customer and what they want too, because there are definitely a lot of categories where the buyer wants to talk to somebody, and it's not just about the software, it's about the whole relationship. So this has been an awesome conversation. I always like to close out with a little lightning round of just, I'll say a word, you say the first thing that comes to mind. It's just fun way to go. You love analogies, right? So, okay. Innovation.
Dilemma.
Oh, that's interesting. Why dilemma, by the way?
Well, the innovator's dilemma, right?
There's dilemma, exactly. And Christensen. Collaboration.
Cross-functional.
Yep. Growth.
Mindset.
Absolutely. We've checked off a lot of books now here. Leadership.
Sorry, what was the next one?
Leadership.
Servant
leadership, absolutely. And then human first. That's a thing we talk about Gainsight.
Empathy.
Yeah, very well said. And I think, it's been a great conversation because, of course, we talked a lot about product management, but I think what we talked about is just leadership in general here today. It's been awesome hearing about your career, using some sweeping generalization, some analogies, some memes.
There you go.
We will all be able to communicate better together. So I will hopefully see you at some barbecue soon. And if I do, I'll ask you what you do for a living. So
I'll throw a sausage on the grill for you.
All right. Sounds good, man. Jason, thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.